over and over. As a result,
and I look at that every time before I go shopping to see what shops I need to go to and see what items I need to buy. And there's another one, a magazine as well that I do like, I subscribe to. It's called Compass News, and that gives you all the current competitions. You know, it saves you going looking in magazines for them or on the web for them. It lists them all there for you to enter, and if you need an answer, it usually gives you the answer as well. So
let's bring Di Cope in then,
brilliant.
The founder of Super Lucky. It's a competition blog. So Di, what are the risks then around comping high? I mean, the reason it's easy to enter more now, obviously, is that we've got online and we've got social media. But aren't you every time having to part with your email address and your kind of name and a bit of your data?
Well, that's what I think people are really worried about now, because they think, oh, I'm not giving away all my details to people. I'm really concerned about being scammed. But actually, the great thing about social media is that you can set up an account really quickly on Instagram or Twitter, and you don't need to share any personal information. You can have a username that's nothing to do with your name. It doesn't need to have your photograph on. So you can actually get started entering competitions, and you won't need to share your information unless you actually win a prize and you get a private message asking for your address details. So you can actually do that kind of competition without handing over a lot of data. On the other hand, of course, there are competitions out there, and I think when people get started entering competitions, they'll stumble across this sort of thing on the internet where there's a lot of boxes to tick, and actually you're putting in all your information, your date of birth, all sorts of things, and then you're ticking boxes to pass that on to other companies, and that's the kind of thing you really need to avoid, ticking all those boxes. So you don't want to be handing over your data to everybody.
What would you say, Di, you need to have to be a company? You know, people listening to this who think, I would like to try that. What kind of character does well let it?
You need to be very patient, because you're not going to win straight away, and you need to be persistent. So I think it's really important, if you want to take up this hobby, do a little bit every single day. You know, have a little routine. If you can find half an hour every day and think, this is my comping time, and that's what you spend doing it. You know, a lot of people think, oh yeah, I can do this. I'll enter 5 competitions to win £10,000. I'm really ambitious, and they don't win. Then they think, oh, that's not for me. But you know, if you want to find a new hobby, it's really fun, and it's not all about the prizes. The actual finding the competitions and entering them is really fun. The community's amazing that's out there. And you can actually learn a lot, because some competitions are on apps that you might need to download. You can actually, you know, whatever age you are, you can learn new skills by entering competitions.
So, Di, if I could go back to you, what would you warn people to look out for? You know, have you ever come unstuck parting with your data or entering a competition that turned out to be a bit of a scam? I'm sorry, Lorraine, I mean.
Oh, right, okay. No, I haven't. I mean, there are a lot of scams on Facebook, especially. You can just enter a competition on Facebook, and then there's scammers out there that are cloning the promoter, and they're telling you that you've won. So, you know, you just have to ignore them. It's so obvious that they're scams, because for a start off, usually they're telling you you've won straight after you've entered, and the competition hasn't even closed yet, you know. So just don't give your details out to anybody. I just ignore a lot of those Facebook ones now.
And Lorraine, just give us your tip then. If you were thinking of doing this, you're very successful at it. And Di thinks it needs, above all, patience and don't give up. What do you think it needs?
Oh yeah, it's just perseverance. You could, I mean, I've even thought about giving up because I've had such lean spells, but I can't, you know, because I know that if you do keep going, you will win something. And it is nice to win little things as well, because they keep you going. You know, you might just win some toiletries that you need, but also that keep you going as well, because you can't always win the the big prizes.
Lorraine Harrison died very recently. Thank you both for your thanks. Bed bugs, it seems, are the things we're aware of when you're going on holiday these days. They're becoming more common as more people travel and more bed bugs get resistant to pesticides. There's been an increase in negative reviews that mention bed bugs on Booking.com. There were more than 800 in 2022, more than 1,300 last year. But obviously it's still small. The chances of getting bed bugs on holiday is still small. There is an AI company in Cambridge called Spotter, and it's developed a bed bug monitor for hotels. It's a small box that sits under the mattress of the bed. It attracts bed bugs, and then there's a tiny camera inside that analyses them and alerts the management so that they can get rid of these bed bugs really quickly. The monitors are being used by thousands and thousands of hotels across the world, including in Paris and London. Robert Fryer, the co-founder and chief executive of Spotter, says part of the problem for businesses fighting bed bugs is the stigma attached to them.
People think that bed bugs are related to cleanliness, and they're really not. Unfortunately, they hitchhike in on bags of clothes, and there's nothing the properties in the hotel management can do about that. It's not their fault that it happens, but the best thing they can do is be vigilant and do everything they can to protect their guests. To do that, then putting in systems that can detect and identify them early so that they can be treated and dealt with before any guests get bitten is the best thing that they can do. We want to work towards a situation where detectors for bed bugs in hotel rooms are seen as just a normal part of the setup. Nobody walks into a hotel room and sees a smoke detector and thinks, oh, this looks like stuff probably fires. Actually, no, that's just being prudent and keeping the guests safe. And bed bug detection is exactly the same thing.
So that's Richard Fry from Spotter. Well, we spoke to Liz Wooding from Hull. She was bitten by bed bugs on holiday in Brighton.
So I stayed in a youth hostel in Interlaken in Switzerland. Just had one night there. Looked all clean and the kind of place that you wouldn't expect to get bed bugs, but it was horrendous. Sort of midway through the next day, realised that everything was itching, and the spots came up, which were really painful. But in rows, you could see where you'd been crawled across and bitten, which was pretty horrendous. They lasted about a fortnight before they went down, and although I managed to stop them spreading, once we got home I basically froze everything or put it in the dryer on high or threw it away, and somehow managed to not get it into my house. I was completely paranoid for a long time, and those spots really hurt. So yeah, not a nice experience.
Liz Wooding. And Martin James is a consumer rights expert, and he's becoming an expert in bed bugs. So Martin, can you see a time then when people will look out for bedding monitors, bed bug monitors in hotels and youth hostels? They expect to see the way they expect to see smoke alarms.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, it's a sensible thing for hotels to install. But of course, one of the reasons why we've seen such a rise in these claims is because many people are using sites like online travel agencies like Booking.com to actually book apartments, and it's often when people are booking those privately owned properties that bed bug problems really come into their own.
Well, why is that? Why would that be the case?
Well, hotels are experts at the fastest turnover of clients and guests. So they have a certain amount of experience, they know what to watch for. As was said before, bed bugs are hitchhikers, they like to jump ship and travel around. So hotels have a lot more experience in dealing with it. Your holiday apartments, it's not that the owners are less keen on dealing with issues like bed bugs, but they are more likely to be less prepared. And that's often where I see some of the nastiest cases where people have had really bad experiences.
There seems to be wide agreement that they're more of a problem than they were. What should you do if you're on holiday and you wake up this way that Liz did?
Well, first things first, try not to panic, because obviously it's a really, really traumatic thing to discover this. In the first instance, contact the hotel or the apartment owner and ask them about how quickly they can get you into a new room or a new comparable apartment. That might even involve changing to another hotel or a completely separate place if need be. Next up, you've got to think about what you've actually done with your luggage. There's lots of advice about not putting your suitcase on the floor in the first instance, because bed bugs can jump ship there. So you're going to need to seal all of your clothing in plastic bags. I would also speak to the hotels about the immediate situation, getting treatment for bites, what they propose to do about potential getting you different clothes, and indeed your travel insurance policy might have an allowance for clothes in the eventuality of loss and damage. But that's the immediate issue. Afterwards, you can certainly make a complaint to the company that sold you the holiday about what you've experienced, and many people have done, and indeed won quite a bit of money.
So you could get compensation?
Absolutely. Now,
Oh, sounds like
companies out there that are basically trying to charge you lots and lots of money to bring legal cases. You don't need to do that. You just need to write to the company and explain what's happened to you and what you're looking for in return. But make sure you cover what you lost from the holiday and your own experiences.
You'd have to have some losses. Would you take some pictures to prove it happened to you?
I absolutely would do, yes, as well. It really, really makes sense to document kind of the situation. I know it's hideous, but it does make sense to take lots of photographs. But if anyone is kind of listening to this and scratching and worrying about the holiday that they've got booked, don't worry. We saw recently that a lot of the stories about the Parisian bedbugs were actually spread by Russian misinformation groups, so it might not be as bad as you think it is.
Yeah, that's what I said. It still remains a tiny proportion of people's holidays. And when we spoke to UK Hospitality, they said they're working with other industry bodies to make sure robust pest control plans are in place and that customers should continue to book hotels and holidays with confidence. Martin James, thank you for that. Thank you. It's been a roller coaster few years for people who work in the wedding business, the caterers, the florists, the venue managers. Weddings were seriously restricted in the pandemic, and then there was a huge backlog to get through. Well, now they seem to have settled down with a little less demand than there was. Just generally, the marriage rate's fallen. In 2022, the proportion of people who are married dropped below 50% for the first time. Some people see a wedding as just unaffordable. Dan Williams feels like that about it. He's 34, he lives in Sheffield with his partner and their 4-year-old daughter. They're expecting another baby.
Marriage, to me, it won't change anything. We love each other, we've got a house together, we've got children together, we're currently engaged, which is really not on our list of priorities. Don't get me wrong, I do love a good wedding, absolutely love going to a wedding, but I just can't get my head around the expense just for one day. And from what I gather from my friends' experiences, that as soon as you say, this is for my wedding, I'm booking this venue for a wedding, it seems like the prices just go through the roof. We like to go on holidays, we're thinking about an extension, obviously the rising mortgage rates, it's stuff to consider before getting married. I just think it's a really big, expensive waste of time.
Dan Williams. The average cost of a wedding increased to more than £20,000 last year. That was up from £18,000 the year before. Yes, £20,000. That figure comes out of a survey of 1,800 couples. It was carried out by Hitched. It's an online platform that helps people to plan their weddings. Zoe Burke is the editor of Hitched. And Zoe, that rise in what couples are spending, is it roughly just in line with inflation?
It's a tricky one to say because obviously it's an average and that spans a pretty broad field. Like to survey, we survey about 1,800 people, so it's quite a broad spectrum. There are various different things that will contribute to the rise. It's undeniable that the cost of living has had a big impact on how much weddings cost, but there are other factors as well depending on what you want to have at your wedding too.
Wedding businesses have gone from kind of bust to boom, haven't they? And then it seems as though some of the business is falling off for some wedding businesses now. Is that how you see what's happening?
It's definitely slowed down a little post-pandemic, and I think at one point it was feeling for a lot of businesses quite unsustainable, the speed and kind of the backlog that they were having to deal with. It's slowed down a little this year, but we are seeing something that has been called in the industry the pandemic gap, where typically people date for 2 years before they get engaged, then they spend about 2 years planning their wedding, and when you go back that 4-year time span, it takes you to 2020, where people obviously weren't meeting. So it's kind of like the pipeline has slowed down a little bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes absolutely perfect sense. I asked at the start of the programme for tips from listeners that had great weddings that didn't cost a lot. Robin Langley says, we hired the local village hall, we decorated it with greenery from our own garden, we bought in a buffet from a small organisation who had alcohol on sale or return, except for a barrel of beer. The total cost 25 years ago was only just over £1,000. Sarah and Bill Lionheart, we got married 33 years ago today. I wore a white summer dress with a velvet curtain around my shoulders as a cloak. My husband wore his own suit, which was unfortunately 2 inches too short on his legs. Our friends bring and share food for us. I've been told that the cheaper your wedding is, the longer the marriage will last, and it certainly seems to be working for us. Shauna Karras is on TikTok, and she gives tips on how to organise weddings and how to cut your costs, and she herself got married in August last year. So, Shauna, did you have a great big expensive wedding?
So yeah, our wedding was, I'd say, expensive. I think all weddings are quite expensive, aren't they, in the scheme of things for a day. But we kind of focused on the things that were important for us to spend money on. So certain aspects.
What were they? What were those certain aspects then when you pushed the boat out?
So I would say music and entertainment was our biggest thing that my husband and I really wanted to spend the money on, because we knew we had like a specific style and a specific feel that we wanted the day to have and the evening to have, and music is what kind of brings us joy and happiness, so that's where we kind of put our bulk of our budget to.
Do you see more people interested now in trying to do a lower budget wedding?
Oh, absolutely. Since obviously being on TikTok and sharing my tips and stuff, I've seen an influx in people in the comments asking a lot more questions and trying to kind of understand how to use certain apps and do certain things, and it seems to be, it's not necessarily a trend, but there's definitely an uptake now in people trying to do things on a cheaper scale but still have them look just as good.
You post instructions on lots of things, but among them, how to provide your own wedding flowers. So if we just use that as an example, how do you do that? Yeah. How much could you save?
So I kind of got a quote from a local florist, and they quoted me from a basic starting cost of £50 per flower centrepiece for the tables. So as you can imagine, that's the starting cost depending on the flowers in the season. So I used local florist shops and also online sellers that sell florals, like artificial flowers, and created my own for only £35. So although it doesn't seem like
£35 at the table.
£35 a table, and then I sold them on after the wedding, so I made some money back from selling them on, and also helped another bride to have flowers at her wedding for a cheaper cost.
So you were saying, although it doesn't seem like a big saving, the difference between £35 a table and £50, I guess it just all adds up.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Sometimes with weddings, the smaller savings kind of have the biggest impact when they start adding up.
If people are going to put a line through, say, just one element of a very traditional wedding, what do you think they're going without, Shauna?
I would say favours. I feel like favours is obviously like a very traditional thing that's always been done, and I've started to see that kind of fizzle out in some weddings.
I'm sorry, what is that, favours?
So on the table settings, people tend to give like a small gift to each guest at the table. So it could be anything from like a bar of chocolate, or I think a long time ago they used to like sugared almonds, that sort of stuff.
I've seen that, yes, sorry.
But sometimes people can spend quite a lot of money on certain like eccentric favours, and if you think you've got a wedding of 100 people and it's like maybe £5 a favour, that's going to add up to quite a considerable amount of money. So personally, I don't think wedding guests expect favours as much as maybe they did before, and it's definitely something you can save on.
Zoe Burke from Hitched. In the pandemic, we heard from lots of people who were forced, because of the circumstances, because that was the law at the time, that you couldn't have a lot of people. And people got in touch with us to say how wonderful these very small, very private weddings have been. And people in the industry wondered whether that would last as a trend. Do you think it is lasting or not? Has it just gone back to exactly the kind of aspirations that people had before?
No, definitely the small wedding is here to stay. We've seen it become an exploding topic recently. It's ranking so high and people are searching so much to have smaller weddings. I do think that the pandemic had a really big impact on how we see the traditional wedding. It made people have to reassess what makes a wedding, and I think a lot of people realised they don't actually have to follow the template that we have always followed, and you can actually reinvent your wedding to suit your needs. And one of those things is not inviting Great Aunt Doris, who you haven't seen for 10 years, because you don't have to.
Also, if you have a really great big bash, you don't get to talk to everybody, do you?
You don't, and it does push the cost up as well. One of the easiest ways to save money at your wedding is to cut that cost per head of your guests.
And Shona, what would be your single best money saving tip, your top one?
I think for me it was the wedding cake. We did a DIY fake wedding cake, so saved hundreds of pounds, and alternatively put out tray bakes that we home baked with my mum for the guests. So as you can imagine, a cost of 3 tray bakes in comparison to the cost of a huge extravagant wedding cake.
Which often doesn't get eaten anyway, does it?
No, and sometimes as a bride and groom you don't tend to see any slice of that as well, so a lot of the time it gets wasted.
Shana Carey Soeberg, thanks so much for that, thank you. The Easter bank holiday is a big time for browsing for property. Zoopla is reporting that confidence is coming back to the housing market. Sales are up 9% so far this year compared with last, and prices are stable, and that is encouraging people to move. Now when you look at what's out there and what it costs, it can be really disappointing. Research for the think tank, the Resolution Foundation, found that we spend more on our housing in the UK than in any other wealthy nation, and we are getting less space and quality for our money. It can be particularly disappointing for older people who are trying to downsize. And Liston and her husband Gerard are trying to move from a house on the outskirts of Hebden Bridge in West Yorkshire and into the town of Hebden Bridge itself. And Anne is on the line. Anne, tell us why you and Gerard want to move.
Well, we're currently living in a 17th century house with a large garden. In many ways it's our dream house, and we've been here for 19 years. We're not in a community though, we're on the, as you said, on the outskirts of Hebden Bridge. And as we get older, and it's more difficult to maintain both the house and particularly the garden. So for example, I've had a couple of accidents which make it more difficult for me to do the gardening. And we would also like to be in the community. So we've been searching for another house so that we can move while we're fit enough to do so and while we're young enough to become part of a different community.
If you don't mind my asking, how old are you both?
I'm 71 and my husband is 65.
So you're looking to do it now while you're still young enough to enjoy it and to meet new people?
Yes, yeah.
So tell us, in an ideal world, you're swapping this 17th century house with a big garden.
Yeah.
And it's up for sale. I've seen pictures of it online. It's got stone mullioned windows. It absolutely is a dream home, and it will be someone else's dream home, I'm sure. What would you like to swap it for? I'm guessing you'd like to swap it for the same thing but smaller in Hebden Bridge. Is that right?
Maybe. Although we're open to looking at different kinds of property. We want somewhere which is maybe slightly smaller living space and with a smaller garden that's easier to maintain, which is within reach of, within walking distance of at least some facilities and some sort of community.
So tell me how your search has been going. What have you seen so far?
We've looked at, we thought that mill conversions, there are a lot of mill conversions locally, mills that have been made into flats. We've looked at one or two of those, but they're very, some of them are a bit soulless, and they contain long corridors where all the doors look the same.
It can be a problem, that, can't it, if you move into anything that was not built as a home?
Yes, yeah, I think it does. And the other element is that some of those properties are very, very expensive for the space that they contain.
Well, let me bring in Lucian Cook, who's the head of research at Savills. Savills looks into supply and demand in the property market in a lot of detail over time. So, Lucian, we talk a lot, don't we, about first-time buyers, the problems they have, but last-time buyers, older people, generally, what are their needs?
Yeah, well, I think, what Anne has told us is pretty typical of a lot of people who are looking to downsize. coming often, though, I suppose where they're a little different is they're a little younger. A lot of people tend to leave it much later in time, but a lot of it is around the manageability of the property. It is around accessibility into and out of the property, so perhaps looking for older age, but also location crucial. So it might be proximity to family, particularly as care needs go up, or otherwise it's proximity to amenities, communities, and public transport.
What proportion of people in the UK are living in homes that are bigger than they need?
Yeah, well, if you look at the English Housing Survey, they've got a technical definition, which is 2 bedrooms more than you need, and they would tell you that just over 50% of owner-occupiers are living in a home which is technically too big for their needs. But of course, that includes people of all ages. What we've done is sort of dig into the weeds. We've had a look at the 2021 census, and that tells us there's about 1.29 million, so just under 1.3 million homeowners over the age of 65 who are living in homes which are 4 bedrooms or more, and that's about 23% of homeowners over the age of 65, so just under 1 in 4.
So that is a lot of potential downsizing. Why doesn't it happen? We talked about the reasons to do it. Why do people not do it?
I think there's a lot. I mean, one of the biggest ones is actually the emotional attachment to people's home, and probably that desire to keep a little bit more space, so when the children come and stay, they can continue to do so and do so comfortably. You know, there's a few things in the tax system. So inheritance tax allowances on your main home are quite generous. Stamp duty is often sort of cited as an issue, but equally the problem that Anna's faced is absolutely on the money. It's a lack of suitable housing to downsize into, particularly when you look at what we build. Tends to be focused on first-time buyers rather than, as you've said, last-time buyers.
Anne, if you have to compromise, then you're looking for something similar to what you're trying to sell, but smaller and in a town where you'll be within walking distance of amenities. If you were looking to compromise, what would you consider?
I think we would consider a smaller living space. And certainly a much smaller garden, and we've looked at a property that has a very small garden, and the possibility is that we might have to move to a different area.
You were just saying, Lucian, that developers are not building the kind of properties that people like Anne and Gerard want. What are they building, and why aren't they building that kind of just smaller house? You know, perhaps the same space downstairs, not so much space as you're used to upstairs, not such a big garden.
Yeah, well, I think some of it is policy, actually. The planning policies and indeed government policy have pushed housing delivery towards the needs of first-time buyers. You can see that, for example, through the Help to Buy scheme. You can also see it generally through levels of planning policy. Where people look at retirement housing, it tends to be that housing which is associated with care. That tends to be the way that it's categorised. Equally, I think from a development perspective, what you tend to find is the type of housing that downsizers are looking for often is not particularly dense. So bungalows are your classic example of something that meets the requirements of lots of downsizers, but it's quite difficult to get those for the maths to stack up for the developers in that particular area. That said, you know, I've long said that I think the downsizing market is probably the last great unexploited opportunity within the UK housing market, and the people who crack it, I think, are going to find huge levels of demand.
Lucian, people who go into retirement flats, some of them have been burnt, haven't they, by very big maintenance costs. I mean, here on New News we've done a lot of stories about that. Perhaps not recently, but certainly in the not too distant past. Has that been ironed out?
Well, look, I would say generally, when you go and you look at your retirement housing needs, that is absolutely sort of nails on the fact that you need to do your research. You probably need to plan quite early in the process, because one of the things that we forget is that moving is a very daunting process, particularly as you get older. That probably means you need a bit of help from your children. You need to look at the full range of options that are available, and look not just at things like service charges, but also about how some of those properties hold that value. That might be the nature of the property that you're buying. It might be the location that it sits in.
And have you and Gerard looked at anything new build? Is there anything in Hebden Bridge?
There's nothing in Headland Bridge. We've looked at one new build house, which was absolutely beautiful, but the stairs were very, very steep. The property that we're currently interested in is actually, it's not a new build, it's a conversion. It's a chapel that's being converted into 6 houses.
How does the price compare, though, Anne, of the new build as against the lovely old house that you're selling? Because that is often a shock to people, that you think you might swap, I don't know, a 4-bedroom, 3-bedroom house for a big flat, and you find that the big new flat costs, you know, a lot more than your house.
Yes, and we found that locally. Yeah.
Lucy Cook from... Sorry, go on.
No, it's okay.
Would you consider going to a new build flat, Anne, without a garden? Or do you just think it's too soon for that?
No, I think we would. I don't think we're into supported living. We would consider a flat if the right flat had the amount of space that we needed. But the ones that we've looked at have just not been suitable. They've been either usually much too small.
Lucy Cook from Savills, it was predicted, wasn't it, that there would be this big rush of retired people downsizing. I think they called it the silver tsunami of downsizers. It just totally has not happened. And then again, when energy prices rose, it was predicted again that it would happen. What do you think the future holds?
Well, look, I mean, clearly we haven't seen downsizing occur in the scale that people anticipated for all of the reasons that we've discussed. I think what you will find is that it will become a more common feature of the housing market. I think you're going to see people want to supplement their pension provision. You're going to see more people want to help their children or indeed their grandchildren get on the housing ladder, and clearly an older population has more complex care needs. But if we're going to address that, we need to create the right environment where it is much easier to downsize. Yeah, and part of that is looking at the barriers to downsizing, and part of that is looking at the delivery of new homes which are suitable for people to downsize, which are just in short supply.
And that will take time, won't it? You can't address housing supply. How long does that take? A decade?
Well,
more?
It takes a long time. It also takes a bit of a change in political emphasis, doesn't it? Because consistently we hear that that first-time buyers are often, and that desire to get people on the housing ladder is probably prioritised over the last-time buyer and the downsizer. So you've almost got to start with that to put policies in place to encourage that delivery of housing which is suitable and tailored to the needs of downsizers, with things like more space and greater accessibility around the unit.
And we all know people, don't we, that have stayed in big houses that they should have sold years ago and then really struggled and regretted it. What's your kind of time frame here? How long will you wait for the right place to come up?
I think we're fairly clear what we're looking for, and we do understand about the time frame. So we're not in a great rush. We're prepared to wait 2 or 3 years to find the right place.
And Mr. Lucy Cook from Savills, thanks both. Good luck to you, Anne and Gerald. I hope you do find what you want. An email that's just come in about downsizing from Mike in Northumberland. We've lived in 3 and 4 bedroom houses. We lived in 3 and 4 bedroom houses. We downsized to a 2-bedroom terrace, a 5-minute walk from the town centre, so we don't need a car. Our council tax is now band B. We put friends and family up when they're visiting in the local hotel. It's absolutely brilliant, and we feel now confident that we can ride out any cost of living problems that are coming down the line. Another one on weddings on a budget. This one is from Julia and John. We got married in Antigua 25 years ago, combining the wedding with the honeymoon stroke holiday. The resort threw in the wedding as part of the deal. Our witnesses were a couple who had arrived at the resort on the same day as us. That's it for today. It's our regular weekly consumer phone-in tomorrow. Tomorrow we want to talk about surge pricing. That's the way the price of something isn't fixed. It goes up or down when there is more or less demand. Happens with travel, it's always happened with holidays, but it's happening now with all kinds of things. Concerts, Uber taxis. It's going to come in with energy tariffs. It's already there with some energy tariffs to encourage people to use electricity at a time when demand is low. So it is a way of balancing price and demand that has really taken off and is going to be much bigger in the future. So what we'd like to know is, does this surge pricing thing work for you? Or do you feel that you're being forced to pay over the odds sometimes? You can email us about that right now, you and yours, at bbc.co.uk. Leave us a contact number because we might want to get back to you. I'll be back tomorrow just after the midday news.
You and Yours is produced by James Leasley, the studio manager, Simon Highfield and Phil. We start a new series in 45 minutes in which Dr. Julia Shaw explores the secret world of expert witnesses, delving into 5 seminal legal cases with an outcome hinged on a crucial piece of expert evidence. You can hear that at 1:45. Now, let's get to weather update. We're joined by Darren Baird.
Thanks very much, Neil. Good afternoon. We've got a band of rain that's moving very slowly northwards through the rest of the day. It's followed by some sunshine, but we're starting to see some showers breaking out as well. Now, this thicker cloud and rain is going to be mainly affecting northern England and southern Scotland, and that's going to keep it on the chilly side here. So temperatures are only going to be around 7 or 8 degrees. Doesn't look quite as wet for Northern Ireland, nor indeed across northern parts of Scotland, where temperatures are likely to reach 10 degrees. But we've certainly got more cloud in Scotland than we had yesterday. Following the band of rain, we've got some sunshine across Wales, Midlands and southern England, but already a few showers breaking out. We'll see more of those over the next few hours. Typical temperatures are going to be 13 degrees, but we're likely to make 15, I think, in the southeast of England. Now, the showers that do develop across England and Wales, most of them will fade away this evening, but I think we'll continue to see some showers running eastwards across southern counties of England right the way through tonight. And at the same time, the rain that's further north moves away from northern England and Northern Ireland, pushing into Scotland, becoming lighter and more patchy. And the lowest temperatures tonight are likely to be where we see the skies clearing in northeast England after the chilly wet weather earlier on in the day. Could be as low as about 2 degrees, but I think for most parts of the UK it'll be 4 or 5 degrees overnight. Now we're heading into Tuesday, and we've still got a lot of cloud in Scotland, some patchy, mostly light rain, mainly affecting the northeast of Scotland. The showers that we'll start with in the southeast of England from overnight, those will soon move away, and then there'll be some sunny spells in much of the UK. The cloud will build up, that will trigger a scattering of showers, and those come ahead of some rain that arrives in the southeast of England during the day. Temperatures ranging from 7 or 8 degrees in northern and eastern Scotland to 15 in southeast England.
I am once again shoveling sounds into a comedy cannon and firing them directly into my all-star panel's faces. Milton, what am I doing?
Dropping a grandfather clock on your foot.
I'm playing pinball. I asked them